She wore oversized glasses, knit cardigans, and had perfect grey curls. On the surface, Dorothea Puente looked like someone's sweet abuela, but under that grandmotherly disguise, she was a remorseless predator. Let's break down the chilling case of the so-called grandma serial killer in 5 minutes. Dorothea Helen Gray was born in 1929 in Redlands, California. Her early days were marked by trauma. Her alcoholic father died of tuberculosis when she was just 8, and her mother died in a car accident the following year. She spent time in an orphanage, where she later claimed she was abused. As a young woman, Dorothea bounced from marriage to marriage. By the age of 40, she had been married at least 4 times, including to a man she'd reportedly poisoned. She also started building a rap sheet, shoplifting, vagrancy, check fraud, and running a brothel under the guise of a care home. But every time she got caught, she reinvented herself. By the 1980s, Dorothea had fashioned a new identity as a caring community matriarch who ran a boarding house for those in need at 1426 F Street in Sacramento. Dorothea's tenants were society's most vulnerable, older men and women with disabilities, addiction issues, or mental illness. Many were unhoused or recently released from institutions. She presented her boarding house as a refuge. Rent was cheap and the meals were home-cooked. The house had a garden, rescue kittens, and a grandmotherly landlady who was always ready with tea and sympathy. But behind the lace curtains, Dorothea was running a fraud and murder operation. She carefully chose her victims, usually people without close family. She'd offer to help them apply for Social Security or disability payments, and then have their checks redirected to her. Once she controlled their finances, she drugged them with sleeping pills, flurazepam, which is a powerful benzodiazepine, and then she either suffocated them or overdosed them. Once dead, she'd wrap their bodies in sheets or plastic and bury them in her backyard, with the help of tenants who had no idea what they were digging. Some corpses were found in a state of advanced decomposition. She did all of this while continuing to cash their government checks. She would even make up letters to send to their families, pretending that they'd move away or didn't want to be contacted. One of her last victims, and the one who ultimately brought her down, was Alvaro Bert Montoya. Bert was a developmentally disabled man with schizophrenia. He was placed in Dorothea's care by social workers from Volunteers of America, who'd believed she would provide him with a stable and safe home. Bert stood out. He was gentle, trusting, and talkative. He even called Dorothea Mum. In October 1988, Bert suddenly stopped showing up to his daily programs. When asked, Dorothea claimed he'd gone to Mexico with some relatives, but the staff weren't convinced. Bert had no family in Mexico. Suspicious, they called his parole officer, who flagged Dorothea's name. She was already on probation for previous fraud charges, and then authorities began to look closer. When police arrived at 1426 F Street in November 1988, Dorothea welcomed them with cookies. She was calm and gracious, offering plausible stories of why several tenants had left. But the officers noticed inconsistencies and the overpowering stench of decay. They brought in cadaver dogs and started digging. What they uncovered was horrific. On the first day of digging, they found the decomposing body of tenant Leona Carpenter, wrapped in bedsheets and buried in the garden. Over the next few days, 6 more bodies were uncovered, including Bert Montoya. He was found beneath a newly laid cement slab, wrapped in plastic, with bits of duct tape still clinging to his body. Toxicology reports showed high levels of flurazepam. By the time authorities were ready to question Dorothea further, she had vanished. She'd slipped away while detectives were still digging. She took a taxi to a motel, dyed her hair red, and boarded a bus to LA. There, she checked into a hotel under an alias and started frequenting a local bar, where she met another elderly man. She told him she was a widow and had just inherited some money, but luckily the man recognized her from the news and tipped off the police. She was arrested on the 17th of November 1988, less than a week after her escape. Dorothea Puente was charged with 9 counts of murder. Ruth Monroe, who was her roommate, she allegedly poisoned with an overdose of medications. Everson Gilmeth, her boyfriend, he was found in a box in a river. Dorothy Miller, Benjamin Fink, Betty Palmer, James Gallup, Vera Faye Martin, Leona Carpenter, and Bert Montoya, all tenants at 1426 F Street. The trial began in 1992 and dragged on for over a year, becoming the longest trial in California's history at that time. The prosecution argued she was a serial killer motivated by greed, methodically drugging and killing her tenants to steal their money. The defense claimed she was simply guilty of bad judgment, that she panicked when people died naturally and buried them because she feared going back to prison. Jurors heard harrowing testimonies, including from a tenant who helped bury the bodies, thinking it was just garbage. In the end, Puente was convicted of 3 murders: Bert Montoya, Dorothy Miller, and Benjamin Fink. The jury deadlocked on the other 6. She was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Dorothea Puente died in prison in 2011 at the age of 82. She never confessed to her crimes. In fact, she spent her prison years painting and crocheting. Her home at 1426 F Street still stands and has become a dark tourist attraction. Dorothea Puente killed at least 9 people, not out of rage or revenge, but because it was profitable. She weaponized kindness. Her disguise wasn't a costume. It was who people wanted her to be, and that's what makes her so terrifying. There is so much more in this case that I couldn't include in the 5 minutes, and if you are interested, please check out Netflix's Worst Roommate Ever series. Episode 1 is about Dorothea Puente. Thanks for joining us for this deeply disturbing case. Please follow us for more true crime cases in 5 minutes.